Hi, I'm Matthew Barr. I actually am at Nokia, which is mapping, which is called here, which is what it says here. So I'm going to be speaking about building a modern infrastructure. I saw some of the numbers, but I was sitting in the back, so I couldn't really tell how many people were new. How many people have been using Puppet for less than 6 months? Everyone raised their hands that has. Okay, great. So that's like the vast majority of you guys. Everyone's been using it more than 3 years. More than 3 years. Okay, so I'm sorry to y'all. This is aimed towards the other side. Hopefully, for those of you that are new, if you don't understand, to steal the Logstash mantra, if you don't understand something in the talk, it's a bug in the talk, not in you. So feel free to talk to me afterwards, and I'm happy to help. Okay. So, is your infrastructure a mess? That's my daughter. So you'll see a couple pictures of her. It's really easy to get cute pictures when your wife says, by the way, while you're gone, here. This is actually last month's Puppet Camp. This was the lasagna, and this was done in New York last month. So this is Monday of that, right after I left. So what we're going to do is define what I mean by modern infrastructure, glance at their architectures, demonstrate how to do some of this yourself, and then go into the details. What is it? I like to think it includes centralized logging, monitoring, orchestration, CI, and metrics. Hint, I'm not going to talk about metrics. Graphite is a good option. Gareth R. actually just joined Puppet a couple weeks ago, and the prior presenter talked about his module. That was the one he showed with the Graphite module. But okay. So we're going to set up a bunch of things. mcollective, Sensu, Logstash, Elasticsearch, Kibana, and then Jenkins. mcollective is for orchestration. It's actually maintained by Puppet Labs. It was originally by Ari Pinar, and uses either ActiveMQ or RabbitMQ, which is interesting because Puppet Enterprise uses ActiveMQ. We're actually going to use a RabbitMQ. It's a little easier. They actually Puppet Labs has a RabbitMQ module that actually helps maintain, and is what we're going to use. So this actually is the general design. You have clients over there, which are actually command and control. You've got middleware, which is the the RabbitMQ or the ActiveMQ. And then each node runs officially the agent, the server, and they talk to the actual middleware. The agents in mcollective are named very poorly. They are the things that actually do stuff. Even though they run on the server themselves, it's very confusing. So Sensu is a distributed monitoring system. It uses RabbitMQ, which is why we're going to be using the same RabbitMQ as for mcollective. Has an easy API, and has a couple really nice benefits over, say, Nagios, for cloud-specific type architectures, or rapidly changing architectures, development, things like that, or private clouds. You can add and remove servers without having to change config files. You don't need to know your servers in order to make the whole thing work and monitor. So it eliminates much of the need for things like stored configs and things like that. And here is the actual architecture diagram. You've got a Redis database up the top that's just local state. It's very minimal. You can have servers that are actually redundant, HA, and API nodes. They talk to RabbitMQ, and every client talks to the RabbitMQ to talk to the servers, and that's really nice. Logstash is a centralized logging tool, and allows you to send data from the shipper, like the actual nodes, to which you don't actually have to use the broker. You can if you want. It's very flexible, which is the only problem with doing diagrams with it, because this is one design. There are about 10 or 20,000 other versions. But you have a node that does indexing, and then you can put it into search, and then you can actually see logs of it. This ends up looking a lot like Splunk, to be honest, eventually. But Elasticsearch and Kibana are the other components that, with Logstash, form an actual cohesive unit. You don't have to use them, but you can. And it says it up there. And yes, this is my daughter in a puppet shirt. This is basically Hello World. What we're actually going to do, Shadow used a set of Forge module to build an infrastructure out. And I actually made a module that is an opinionated profile module. Something you might do at your office. I put it up in the Forge mostly so you guys could look at it and see it. I need to improve a couple aspects because the actual dependencies are kind of missing right now, so I'm sorry. But you can download that and actually get the code, and it'll mostly work for some things. So, what this actually will do is build a RabbitMQ server and Sensu server. It has also the admin host, which has the mcollective client, which means you can actually look around and see what else is happening on your network. It adds a Logstash server and a Jenkins host. And each server will send logs via Logstash order, run Sensu client checks on them, which basically means you have active monitoring of those nodes, and have an MCO server, which is going to basically allow you to run commands on them from the centralized host. This module is very opinionated. It's really just a profiles module, just like he was talking about earlier. It doesn't have much of the code. It pieces together other modules that are on the Forge in order to make them actually effective and useful. Here is how you can actually install it with Puppet on command line in Unix. So this is basically the interface. You've got one long list of parameters, and that is pretty much all you need to do to talk to this. This is the public interface to this code. You specify the RabbitMQ server, Logstash server if you want to use it, whether or not that server is supposed to be a RabbitMQ server, whether it's a client or a server for I'm Collective, etc., etc., etc. And if this is why Hira comes in handy, because you don't necessarily want to put all these things in every time you run this code. So you can put it in pretty much here, and you'll set up passwords and usernames and things like that. Now, this is actually the site PP that executes this code. I'm just using a default node. The nodes the server doesn't know its nodes. This is really kind of handy in, say, AWS, where you aren't going to know your nodes. Even if you're in VPC, you still won't necessarily know your host names. You don't control everything. And so you can go ahead and do some very interesting things with external facts by, as part of the actual build process, just dropping a fact, even with like an auto-scaling system, auto-scaling groups or something like that. You can just drop a file into the host as part of the initial spin up, and it'll tell it, like say, role. And if you have that in there, then you can actually see, and Puppet will send that fact to the master, and the master will say, hey, you're a role mcollective, you're a role Puppet master, you're a role Logstash server, or a Jenkins server. And from there, you can actually see what ends up happening. And you can see that I'm calling the modern infra module, and basically setting a couple of flags. Fairly easy, and it's really only things that change per system. You're not setting the global settings because we had those on the Hira across the board, like Hira common.yaml or something like that. So, RabbitMQ is the middleware that's used in this case by both mcollective and Sensu. We're actually using Puppet SSL certs for connections. So we're not running another CA. This is kind of handy because they all really need to have their own SSL certs to work. But you've got this CA that you've just finished, entire operating, PKI infrastructure that you have for Puppet. Well, can't we use those again? So we do. It actually, in this case, adds a second cert for the host, so that the RabbitMQ server has a different cert for itself versus the actual host that it's running on, which can be handy for a couple of the tools that don't like to talk, to check to see if their peers are there. This is just pretty much how you actually end up building that out with this. We're running RabbitMQ, the mcollective client, and the Sensu server on this box. And this is what it ends up coming up and looking like when it actually is working. This is just RabbitMQ's status page from there. Brings up a web tool. It's one of the modules. It's one of the plugins that's installed as part of this tool. It's port 15672. And you can see I have 4 hosts running, both Sensu and then also mCollective. So the tops are mCollective, and these are the Sensu nodes. I'm cheating, however, on this because there's a bug on Ubuntu Sensu that won't, in RabbitMQ, that won't let you actually use the SSL certs right this second, so I had to cheat. All right. Yeah, it actually looks like it's fixed in Erlang with P1701. mCollective is what powers the live management on Puppet Enterprise. It's really handy. It uses SSL. In this case, I'm actually doing slightly more than the naive installation from the guides. It actually uses SSL to secure pre-shared keys connections instead of doing the full end-to-end encryption, which is relatively complicated. You have to do key distribution. This still gives a pretty good amount of security because you're using SSL certs validated on both ends, and using a pre-shared key on top of that. This is the output of just running an MCO ping, or sorry, package status, and you can actually see what mCollective can do. Have people heard of other people using mCollective? Have people seen the PE console where you can do live management? You can see what groups are in place. You can see what version of Puppet is even running. This actually tells me that I have no version of the package Puppet installed on Puppet Master, actually, because it only has the Puppet Master package and the Puppet Common, but not Puppet itself. The other 2 nodes all have 362. The other 3 nodes have 362, and they're installed from Puppet Labs directly. Come on, there we go. Sensu is currently installed on 4 nodes, in this case. This is actually all running on AWS. I just spun it up last night again. And I'll show live stuff after at the end of this. I wanted to make sure that network actually wasn't going to drive the presentation to the ground. So everyone hates when the presentation fails because no internet. It can do distributed checks. What's really important here is that things happen from the server says, hi, everyone go ahead and do this check. And the nodes all listen and say, ooh, I'm a web server. I'm going to do all the checks the server sends for web servers. It's a subscription model. It's fantastic for widely divergent spaces. You can do it across regions, things like that. If you use federation across zones and regions, it also works. This is their dashboard. The funny thing is they've deprecated this dashboard in 13.13, which means that I'll show you the new dashboard that they just came out with that's a little nicer after the end of this. It just came out a couple weeks ago, so that's why the presentation hasn't been updated. Here you can actually see the fact that we've got multiple clients. Can people read that from where they are? This screen is huge, but not quite as big as I thought it would be. Can you guys see this? Okay. By the way, if people have questions, if you want to come up to the microphones, come on up. In the middle is okay. Come on up and ask. And here you can actually see some of the other checks that we're actually running and how they're actually working and how often they're happening. I really can't read that very well, I'm so sorry. So this is actually the profile I'm using to make Sensu go with the checks. These are actually described. These could be inside of, say, your web server, your application modules, or things like that. Instead of having to be in the actual infrastructure modules, each application group might have checks that they're defining themselves that you're not centrally controlling. So you can, it is compatible with Nagios checks, and so it uses basically that same style. So 0, 1, 2, 3 results, 0, okay, etc. And that's pretty much what it's for. The great news is it really makes it easy to move from, say, a Nagios style set up to something that's more distributed and more scalable. And we already talked about Logstash being centralized logging. It basically is a routing system for messages, and I'll have them show up in a second. There's inputs, outputs, and filters, and it has a ton of things. Some of the inputs can be things like syslog or files or Redis. Outputs go to either Graphite or Elasticsearch or any number of other things, and you can mutate things in the middle with filters. And this is a partial list of the codecs, inputs, filters, and outputs they have. I'm not going to read them. They're on their website. It's really long. Pretty much anything you can think of to put something into the system is a way to get it in. Any way you want to put it out, you want to get it out. And this is just the basic config of how to actually push the actual configuration down to it, and installs the web client as well. This is the contents of the config file. You can see most of it actually managed to fit onto one slide, which was kind of important. And this is basically the part that sends data from everything that's actually in. This is the receiving side actually for Lumberjack. So it allows contents from the actual remote servers to send in. The forwarder is what actually runs on clients, and it's sent via SSL to the actual main server and keeps track of, kind of like the Splunk agent does. It allows you to go ahead and send files, see what things are doing and how far into the file you are. So as files rotate, it keeps track of that, keeps track of positions, and doesn't send all the data multiple times and all those things. Kibana is the web interface that's similar to, say, Splunk. And this is kind of what it looks like. You can barely read it. I'll zoom in a little bit on the bottom portion. You can kind of see how it can categorize different events and filters. And if you've done things, you have to do a little more work than you do with Splunk, because you have to actually tell it a little bit more about what messages it's getting. But if you do it right, you can actually have it so it will sort data. You can do searches on the metadata. You're basically specifying the metadata in the actual logs, and it can pull data out of it in a really nice fashion. Does everyone know what Jenkins is? Anyone not know what Jenkins is? Okay, Jenkins is a continuous integration server. There's a Puppet module for setting up Jenkins, which actually we're using here, and it's really easy to do that portion. The tricky part is once you have it set up, you get this, which doesn't really help you very much if you want to actually use it. But in some ways, Jenkins can be thought of as a tool to run jobs repeatedly on a schedule or based on some kind of a trigger. There are many, many modules, plugins available that can help define some of the actual triggers, things like git commits or some other action can happen. You can output Maven, Ant, RPMs, any number of other details you can output, but really it's basically cron that's got a GUI that can be triggered by the end user or by some other set of actions. I've actually seen people do backups with Jenkins, oddly enough. I've seen Puppet code be continuously integrated to do testing. It's primarily used by the software engineers for testing code. So every time they commit something to code, to the repo, it ends up triggering a build. The build happens, checks it out, makes sure it actually passes all the tests, and then maybe makes our WAR files and publishes that back to the FTP server or the Yum repo or something like that. This module doesn't do things like build your Puppet Master or set up names for the Puppet Master or things along those lines. I do have CloudFormation templates, which is in AWS, for doing this stuff, so you guys can see that and use that. And it may actually let you sleep a little better at night because you don't have to go to each server. Now, I've got a bunch of appendixes. I don't have to go through them. Anyone who wants, people can ask me questions. And I work for here. We are hiring here in Boston. We have a ton of job openings around here, so please talk to me. This code is available there. The module is Modern Infra. And This slides will be posted later to Puppet Labs, and in fact, some of the stuff presentation is also available last week. I think they posted it on the website of the Puppet Camp New York, and I'm pretty sure they'll post this video also later on. So, questions? Okay, come on, guys. Can you come up if you can?
Can you yell really loud?
Yeah, you can. I can hear you.
Is Lumberjack like a broker or an indexer?
So Lumberjack is actually the Logstash forwarder. It's just the internal name they use. It used to be called Lumberjack, but that was confusing to people. It is literally the agent that runs on clients. It's a small Go program that they actually have packages available of, but it's a small package that communicates over SSL to something, in this case to the Logstash server running the Lumberjack, just be declared with the Lumberjack package, and accepts it, and that's really all it does. The Logstash process is basically a system that routes the messages, and then stores it in theory into like Elasticcache or something else, Elasticsearch or something else, or another database. So it's not really an indexing, but it's looking that way. Anybody else? Really? Yes, sorry. Sorry, what? Mm-hmm. So the mcollective module from Puppet Labs requires, especially the new version, requires you to have set up RabbitMQ or ActiveMQ already. So that doesn't really help you, which is why this module exists, because it's actually not easy to set up that for either Sensu or for mcollective. There is a ton of code, and let's see if I can't show you. Hold on a second. All right, I gotta make that a little smaller, otherwise you'll never see. This is the RabbitMQ setup code for this common server, which is why I didn't go into this code. This goes ahead and shows you, sets up the RabbitMQ, sets up their certificates, sets up, copies the Puppet Labs certs, the Puppet certs, into the proper place for RabbitMQ. Sets up Stomp, Collective, sets up the actual RabbitMQ queues and usernames, etc., etc., etc. And that's why it's complicated. This is pretty much the basis of the code that was recently published in the example section for mcollective for RabbitMQ, in addition to the Sensu stuff. This is complicated. This is why you need a profile module, and most people don't want to write their own profile module to do this because it's really painful for this stuff. Next question.
Do you have any experience using the Logstash RabbitMQ input? Is it stable and worth using?
I haven't actually used it because I haven't bothered, because I've wanted to have a little bit more diversity. I didn't want to have all the messages hitting the RabbitMQ server like the same way. The question was, did I have any experience using the RabbitMQ input to Logstash? So, remember when I said there's a ton of inputs? There's a lot of inputs. UDP, TCP, Logstash, syslog, RabbitMQ, pretty much Redis, there's a ton of things. So, no. Yes, Steve?
So, say I've deployed this infrastructure, and now I want to put like a cluster of apps or something.
Right.
Does your pattern also have opinions about how I should do that?
No. This is pretty much a very basic thing that really exists to show you how to go ahead and get this stuff working. And thank you, TextMate, which wants to go ahead and make my life helpful. This is really around primarily to make mcollective, Sensu, and Logstash work, each of which are difficult because they all involve SSL certificates. It's a pain to deal with. Anyone else? Yeah.
On an internal secure network, just out of curiosity, do you have to turn off that SSL?
No, you don't have to turn it off. If you wanted to turn it off, you could, I suppose. This module is not designed for that. It's complicated. Setting up everything in order to make it work is actually hard, and mcollective pretty much requires something. It doesn't require SSL, but it does require a pre-shared key. You could go ahead and, if you wanted to not use SSL, eliminate most of these, I think. If you turn those off, most of them would work. I think it would just work at that point. But you do also have to specify the actual, the password at some point and all that. I think I'm setting it someplace else. But yeah. Sorry, no, that's the RabbitMQ. So you have to turn off RabbitMQ, and then you have to also turn it off inside we've got it. This is the contents of the Modern Info package. Yeah. You'd have to turn off half of this also. So it's kind of complicated. And this is part of the reason why you need profile modules for this stuff, because it's really painful to integrate this stuff. It's great building blocks, but someone described, you described it earlier, the Craig Dunn's roles and profiles. There was a competing concept at the same time, blog post that was talking about Lego modules and Lego blocks that really does describe what you're doing. You're taking Legos and then building on top of them to build out actual full systems. So this helps build out a lot of pieces that are relatively complicated to do. Anyone else? Yes?
What would be the recommended way for pre-processing the inputs? For example, maybe it's within Logstash, you've got a large log file that's growing 10,000 lines a minute. You just want some subset of that data.
So Logstash is designed to go ahead and do that work, either run a full Logstash locally before you send the data off, which it can chain Logstash units, so you can process it locally and then send it off, or grep, I suppose, but you really wouldn't do that. You'd probably just send it into a Logstash and then have filters to drop all the data you don't want or pick out the data you did want. That's probably the best bet. I'm not an expert on Logstash. I've got 1 or 2 commits into the project, but not a massive amount. It really can do almost anything you want, and that's kind of helpful. The truth is, it sounds like we need to do a Logstash talk at Puppet Boston, which Steve and I are both running. So if you'd like to see that soon, we can do that. I also want to go ahead and pimp it a little bit just because we're probably going to do a Vagrant talk soon. In fact, next week, next Wednesday night, we're going to be bring your laptops. We will publish out a Vagrant box, a Vagrant file, which will set up a master, and then you can get your pick of like an Ubuntu or Red Hat or something like that system, a CentOS system or something along those lines. And that way you can we can help you build any kind of questions you have or fix up anything you need to do. Any other questions?
Thank you, Matthew.
Okay.
So we're about to go into lunch, but I want to introduce the folks who are here from Puppet Labs so that you know who you can come ask a ton of questions of during your lunch break. So hopefully that'll be helpful. So let's see if this is still working. Is it still working?
I might turn it down.
Maybe person. Can I have it back? There you go. Awesome. Okay, so I'm Kara. I'm a community manager at Puppet Labs. Feel free to come ask me anything about the community. I can help connect you with resources.
And I'm Christy Snow. I'm events coordinator, so you can ask me any questions about this event, any Puppet camps coming up, Puppet Conf, anything like that, anything events, you can ask me.
My name is Patrick Maddox. I'm the Director of Solutions Engineering, and basically my team's here to help understand what your problems are and how Puppet can be used to solve them.
Paul Cannon, I'm the Technical Solutions Engineer for the New England and Canada region, or this side of Canada region. So I'm here for any technical questions you have for us any pre-sales.
Hi, I'm Kelly Bailey, and I'm also with the local account team.
I'm Ashley Penny. I'm with the modules team, so if you have any questions about developing modules, come find me.
I'm Ranjit Biswakumar. I'm with Professional Services. I'm based out here in Boston. If you're interested in talking about training or consultation in the area, you can talk to me. I've met several of you already through training, so glad to be here.
Hi, Greg Larkin, based out of New Hampshire, also on the professional services team, and conduct training. And if you have any questions about just general infrastructure issues, how you might apply Puppet to yours, if you're just getting started, please come talk to me.
Perfect. Thanks. So now you can kind of get a good look at who you want to come and ask questions of later. But Matthew's got a little bit more, it turns out.
Got to do the demo.
There's always, like every demo, something goes wrong, so this is a new version.
I just got C, 4. There we go.
Good, okay, here we go.
Okay. Sorry about that. I actually intended to show you guys how this stuff actually works. Would people like to see any part of it? You can go to lunch, those of you that want to leave, it's fine. But I thought you might want to actually see some of the stuff. Oh, that's a little too big. There we go. So this is what you can just, if you want to do MCO ping, which is mcollective ping, you'll actually see what happens. You can see live data off the actual nodes that are there. And you can do things like MCO package. I think it's actually Puppet. Okay, you can see the versions, these are live. It doesn't actually know what systems are out there. It actually sends a broadcast via mcollective, via RabbitMQ to all the nodes. They say, I do match that or not. Dash F, all equals Puppet. And you can specify facts. In this case, I'm specifying that the role is actually Puppet. Or in this case, maybe Jenkins. It'll tell me what node that is if you wanted to find the actual node that was running Jenkins and get information on the actual packages that are installed. So that's mcollective running there. A little too big. Ooh, this is really tight. Can you guys see that okay? Yeah. So. This is Kibana, showing what kind of log messages we're sending and seeing. This is Jenkins. And this is the new sensor dashboard. There's currently a lot of errors because I didn't actually put some of the files in place. There are 4 nodes connected, and they show the current state, things along those lines. This all came from very little code, and that pretty much is that. So, Pete, do you have any other questions for anyone? Okay. Thank you.